everyone. This is yet another episode of Career Talks by Welcome Solutions. And in these meetings, we talk with professionals who have interesting career paths and who are sharing their awesome life hacks with us. And today I have great pleasure to introduce Dr. Laura Pirro. Dr. Laura Pirro is an Italian chemical engineer. In 2014, she obtained her master's degree and decided to work in the chemical industry for a couple of years to get a taste of the world outside of academia, before deciding whether to commit to a postgraduate study. Then she went for a PhD at Laboratory for Chemical Technology of Ghent University, and in the end of 2020, she successfully graduated. Currently, Laura works as an R&D engineer at Yara Sluiskil in the Netherlands in the field of agricultural products. Great to have you, Laura. Thank you so much for visiting us today. And I'm most happy to see you. I have to say this is the topic a little bit out of my comfort zone because I have no knowledge of agriculture, but I'm very curious to hear more about it. And I'm very curious about your story, given that you went to industry and then to academia, and then back to industry. So I would be most happy to hear how it all looks from your own perspective.
Thanks a lot for the invitation, first of all, and also for this brief introduction. It's always interesting when other people tell your story. Yeah, so you started from the very end, agricultural products, which is something relatively new in my life. So I will go a bit back to the origin, since this interview is, yeah, about people who transitioned also from academia to industry. In my case, there was a double transition. So we can divide it in three periods: the pre-PhD, the PhD, and then the post-PhD, which is quite recent. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm Italian from Naples, in the south of Italy. And that's where I spent the first 23 years of my life. I studied at University Federico II of Naples, which is, yeah, certainly in southern Italy, probably the most important institution for chemical engineering. And yeah, my academic story was quite normal, I would say. I was a good student, graduated on time with good marks. I did an interesting thesis project because it was a collaboration with the National Research Council of Italy, and that's why it was a one-year project. And after that, of course, there was a possibility of staying for a PhD, either in Naples or yeah, somewhere else abroad. But I thought, no, that's something. It's not for me. I liked university, but I'm done with being a student. I want to go into the real world. Yeah, at that time, I think I didn't know really well what a PhD would entitle. So for me, it was more like prolonged study, and I was done with that. And that's why I moved to Milan in the north of Italy immediately after graduation to work first as a process engineer in an engineering company, and later for a shorter time as a account manager in the field of water treatment. So let's say I changed two jobs in 2 years because, yeah, I was searching for something. I didn't know what I was searching for, but my first job, which was a really good experience with very nice people, and I could learn a lot from them, but it was quite, I would say, classical engineering job. So some simulations, some data sheets. It's things that chemical engineers can relate to, but it felt not very applied. So I felt it was not that I was really searching for. And that's why then I had this other kind of experience where account manager, when I started, I even didn't know what that meant really. I just jumped into that. And then it was a combination of sales engineering and field service engineering. So basically, you had the selling part of products for water treatment in chemical plants, and you also had the field service part, which means really some maintenance and quality checks in the plants. It was a shorter experience, only 8 months, quite intense because I was on the road all the time, every day a different customer. And so it was really positive from certain points of view because I got that hands-on experience I was searching for. But also on the other hand, oh yeah, the sales part was not really something I was ready for at that moment. I enjoyed the technical aspects, and it was too early for me to to focus on the sales. A combination of personal life factors brought me to Belgium, and that's where, let's say, the PhD life started. I wanted to move to Ghent to follow my boyfriend, and the problem was Ghent is in Flanders in Belgium, and as a chemical engineer, when you want to work in the industry, typically you need to know the language of the place you're working with. Depends on the jobs, not for every job, but for many jobs in chemical plants, you need that. And I didn't know any Flemish, which is a sort of yeah version of Netherlands. Um, I had some options. I could study Dutch in Italy and then try to move, but that would take quite some time. I was also not very experienced, so nobody would really hire me for my experience. And then I went back to the idea of the PhD because the PhD in university was in English, so the language requirement was not there. And throughout the time, I kept it in the back of my mind because I have to admit, many of my most brilliant colleagues from University in Naples, they did a PhD. And, I felt like I still wanted to give it a try to see if I could do that, if that kind of challenge was something I could face. And yeah, I told myself if I find something that I like in Ghent, I will go for it. And there was this project, which was a project with Ghent University, but also with Total. Well, before you would have called it the oil and gas major. Now it's really an energy company, so they're also transitioning. So it was industrial academic collaboration, and for me that was really ideal because I knew that I wanted to go back to industry at some point. So to have a sort of industrial PhD was interesting. In the end, I performed all my work at the laboratory for chemical technology, but just the 6 months reviews with the industry or the monthly update that gave me really a feeling of okay, there are people, yeah, who want to know something from me. Of course, also your professor wants to know something for you, but PhD is by definition quite a it can be a lonely job at times, at many times, and so I really need these kind of interactions with people, and having not only people in university but also people in the industry I could talk to. That was very good. And maybe later I can tell you more about the PhD experience, but that's been great. Like a lot of ups and downs, and also a lot of downs as anybody else, but it has been 4 super enriching years. um, and then at the end I had to decide a bit what to do, stay in university or not, go back to Italy or not. But then there was also the pandemic, so it's been quite a difficult year 2020 to make life decisions. So my partner and I we decided to stay in Belgium because the paradox it was easier to stay here than to go back to Italy, for instance. And we like it here. We're quite happy here. So um, and then we both searched for a job. So 2020 was quite intense because we were both writing our thesis, trying to finish more or less at the same time, searching for jobs, interviews, and the lockdown and everything. And I found a job which I thought I would really like, and I started that mid-October last year. But that experience lasted only 3 weeks, because yeah, the company was facing some difficulties and had to fire some people. So after 3 weeks in this job that I'd been waiting for since June, I signed in June, I started in October, and by the 3rd of November, I had been fired already. So it was quite a harsh start for my industrial career after the PhD. So yeah, there were a couple of difficult months also because I was doubting my decisions again. I thought, okay, maybe, yeah, it's a sign I should stay in university. There were some possibilities of doing some nice things there. And I also started really reevaluating everything I wanted. But I'm happy that in the end, I went back more or less on the same path that I had chosen, meaning an R&D job in the industry, in a company, Yara, which that's where I started in January, which so far has been, yeah, a really, really great place to work in. So so far it's a happy ending, but I can tell you that November was not the easiest month. So that's a bit where the three parts and the final part, the post-PhD life, has recently started, but has been already quite rich in emotions, I have to say.
Mhm. Very interesting. Well, I mean, good that it ended up well for you. So in the end, you found a job in a good place. Can you tell us a little bit more about this experience in your first job after PhD? Like what happened? Like what? Because I live in the Netherlands, and I think here in Western Europe, like you live close by as well. And so like here in Western Europe, it's quite unheard of, I think, to lose a job after 3 weeks, right? So what happened?
Yeah. So the technical aspects I still don't know about how easy it is to fire somebody, but it really has to do when you are a very short time in a company. It's very easy to fire in the very beginning. For me, the trauma was a bit that I grew up in Italy with this idea of the permanent job position, which is very difficult to achieve, at least in Italy. Um, and so after my PhD, I signed a permanent job contract, and I felt like, okay, now I can relax. I don't, for the first time, I don't have a very short, limited time horizon. I have a career in front of me. I will take it slower but deeper. So I felt like, okay, now I want to commit to this company, which I'm not going to mention the company, and I also removed it from my LinkedIn profile because my purpose is not to do bad advertising to that company. There are still people I really like in that working in that company, so my purpose is not to harm them, but it's been really traumatic because it was an interview process which started in March and ended in June, very long with very many steps, and they could have stopped it at any time. Like I was having other interviews which were frozen because there's the pandemics, we don't know. So, but no, they went ahead, and we went till the very end, and I could sign the contract in June for October because I first wanted to finish my commitment at university and not leave things open. And then, yeah, I started, and it was only 3 weeks, but I was already feeling good there. It was an R&D job about product development. And even though there was pandemic, since I was new and I had to learn, I could go there on the productive side every day, started to meeting the colleagues, and so it came totally unexpected. I have the weekly call with my manager to see how it was going, and when I opened the camera, also the HR manager was there, and that was a bit surprising. And so the reason was that the company had had very bad financial results for quite some time, even before Corona. But yeah, they sort of kept ignoring it, and just in R&D, they hired 4 people in 2020, and in November, 2 of us had to leave. So I had just started. This other person was much more experienced than me, but was new in the company since March. She also had to go. And there was no good explanation. But okay, what I learned a bit afterwards is that in August, the CEO had been fired. And I had read that, so I had even called the manager to ask, like, is everything okay in the company? Because I'm going to start in October. When a CEO is fired, something is wrong. And I was totally reassured. And I'm sure my manager meant well, because she was really confident that R&D would not be impacted. This position was really needed. I remember she told me, we're waiting for you. There's so much work. So I got even excited after that call. But then, let's say the interim CEO in October was not confirmed. So there was a second change.
Mm-hmm.
And the second change in all the executives, the first action was to to cut costs. And of course, R&D is not like operations in the chemical industry. Productive people who really make the product, well, they are very important, otherwise you don't sell. And companies which are a bit short-sighted, as this company proved to be, they cut on R&D. While, I would say a company which is facing troubles should invest even more on R&D, because from R&D, something new can come, which might even save your company. But anyway, so that's been quite a trauma for me, but there have been even crazier stories in this company. A friend of mine, she got promoted, and after 5 days she got fired. So the the people who are making the budgeting, yeah, where the budget didn't reflect the real financial situation of the company. And all this kind of stuff I didn't know. During your PhD, you are in this sort of bubble, which has a lot of negative aspects, but also some positive ones. You are a bit protected by this real world experience where I ended up just being a number on a budget list that had to be cut. So that was the shock. Not really, I knew I could recover,
Mm-hmm.
also because of all the support I got from people. It was very nice. I just wrote one LinkedIn post. Yeah, maybe a bit sentimental, but it was really a call for help, because I had lost my job and I needed help to find another one. And the number of reactions I got and the quality of those reactions has been really amazing. And I don't mean only on LinkedIn, but really people who asked me for the CV, sent it to their bosses. And I realized that even though PhD can be a bit lonely at times, those 4 years of building networks here and there, in the end, they really paid off, because I felt so much support. So I'm even slightly grateful for this trauma, because it helped me rediscover all the network of people who were there for me. And so that has been the positive side. So a really important message is, it doesn't matter how difficult your research is and how much you need to focus, but try to save some time for getting out there, going to events, okay, when events will be allowed again, going to seminars, or going to things which are not even necessarily in your bubble. It can feel like a waste of time sometimes, but I'm 100% sure it would pay off. I thought it even before, but then I had a real good proof. So that's a bit how it went.
Actually, you covered a lot of important aspects here. I think, first of all, well, from what you said, it felt like the company that hired you was really scrambling and they were on the edge of their financial capabilities at that point, and possibly some bad financial management in the process and miscommunication. So, was it a large company? What could you reveal more or less what the headcount was?
Yeah, no, so it's let's say, I don't think it's one of those brands that if you read it you recognize it, but it's a company which produces for many important brands. So it's a Belgian company, but with a very international footprint. So yeah, and there were many people affected by this. And it's not the small local company who has not had has not focused on budgeting enough, or a startup who is scaling up and gets in trouble. No, it's a very well established company, quite old, and so I still don't understand how that is possible.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's corona time, so a lot of companies
yeah, yeah.
issues and
That's true. That would explain it, but I think this was deeper, because also it's a company selling consumer products. So consumer products, they went up because people during the pandemics, all of us, we got a bit crazy and we started buying more in the supermarkets. And so the competitors of this company actually gained profit during Corona
Mhm.
because of our, yeah, a bit crazy behavior in buying as much as possible because we are scared. So of course, Corona could have played a role, but that felt deeper. And that's also why I'm so surprised they didn't stop my application process earlier. It would have been so easy to stop it and say, look, we're facing some issues. I would have understood, and maybe, yeah.
Right,
So the pity was for the lost opportunities in
right.
between.
Well, the point is there are many ways of making mistakes in the process. So you can fall off, from your like, building a good income stream in many different ways. For instance, by just misjudging the situation and not adjusting the way you advertise your products or services, and just sleeping over when the opportunity comes, or in many different ways. And maybe someone made strategic mistakes in the process, and like in the if when there's opportunity, not every company will benefit in the same way, because some of them are better prepared than others and act
Yeah.
faster and adapt fast.
Yeah. But that's also why I prefer not to say the name of the company. Of course, the people who know me know already, but I don't want to say the name because there might be a lot of aspects behind that I don't know and I don't understand. I can only tell facts from my perspective, and a company which seemed quite solid, established, and no clear reason for, at least for from the outside, was sort of collapsing inside. The company is still operational, and so yeah, I'm maybe I wish them to recover, honestly, for the people who work there. And uh, but yeah,
But
maybe after Corona.
yeah, but it's also true that if you come to the company, then you are on the outskirts. You're on the if there is a financial crisis and there is a there will be cuts, then people who came last will be the first ones to go. That's also true. So you're
Yeah.
not protected yet, and they don't have as like they didn't build bonds with you over like the last few years. So you're the disposable one. So that's also true.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also true that my friend who was fired after getting promoted, she'd been in the company for a few years already. And you know and they also cut a lot of management people. So the trauma was also because in your PhD there are a lot of difficulties, but you are the owner of your story. So not always you can influence everything you do. Sometimes things just don't work out, but you feel like you're in charge. Well, you are in charge, and nothing will happen if you if you don't do stuff. So I felt, maybe I didn't realize it at the time of the PhD, but I felt more powerful because I was my own company, basically, with, of course, my professor, the other supervisors, my colleagues. But that was my work, and I could lead it. And then I had this experience when I was just a number in a budget list, and that was crazy. And in this new job now, I even told during the hiring process to my current manager, I told him this story because I I felt it was important for him to know that I'm aware I'm just a number, but I don't want to be that. So it also played an important role then in choosing this new job. The fact that he understood that, and that he really he was already sure that this position would be okay, but he even went to his boss to bring my story, to say, look, we cannot make mistake with this girl. So yeah, I'm sure there are many companies who work differently whenever possible. But yeah, I've never been in the position to choose who has to go and who has to stay. So I don't judge that. I can only tell the story from my perspective.
Right, right. Well, you also touched another subject that is, I think, really important, which is that the job search process is also very energy consuming, and it's a unpaid time that you have to spend, and stress that you have to take on your shoulders to actually land a position, and it
Yeah.
takes long weeks or even months, and often preparing for multiple interviews without any guarantee that it will even pay off. And even if you land a contract, it can still happen what happened to you.
Yeah, yeah. So having to do that twice in 6 months was not the nicest, but I was also, let's say, lucky because there are many people who experience the same thing, and the outcome has not been as positive yet. So, but yeah, searching for a job when you have I experienced both. I had to do it when I had already a job, my PhD, and that meant waking up very early or working till very late to make things meet, because and assessments and logical tests and presentations and etc. It's all different, and sometimes when you don't know exactly what you want to do, you even apply for different kind of jobs which require your story to be told differently. So if you want to do R&D, you have to bring your story from your R&D perspective. You want to do operations, in my case as chemical engineer, you have to highlight other things, or project management, you have to highlight other things. So all those really required you manipulating your story every single time, and it was very intensive. But then the second time I had to search for a job while not having a job, and that also took my whole day. So my boyfriend used to tease me and say, "Okay, you're the busiest unemployed person I know," because I got to my desk in the morning and I started going through potential positions. I had my Excel spreadsheet with a position I was interested in, a link, a reference person, and a sort of status of, okay, did I send the CV? Did I send the cover letter? So I didn't do it the first time, but now, okay, I had more time, so I did it more structured.
Mhm.
And I had to be honest, it was much more efficient. It was, if I could do it as a full-time job to search for a job, yeah, it was much more efficient. But yeah, also very tiring indeed. And also many of those conversations which led nowhere. I have to admit, especially with consultancy companies. I'm not talking about big consultancy companies, maybe more local ones, but having to go through those interviews and then at the end you find out there's not even a position, and it's just to put your CV in a pile and to have a database for whatever reason in the future. I understand, but it should be very clear from the beginning that this is the purpose of the conversation. Otherwise, you invest a lot of energy and then at the end you find out, yeah, we don't really have a position for you, but okay, it was good to get to know you. So after the first 2, 3 times it happened, I started to ask even before taking the call, because it's not because my time was too precious, but my energy was precious, and you have to balance that. So it's quite yeah, for people out there who are searching for a job and it's being stressful and tiring, I feel you.
Yeah,
And yeah, I can just wish a good outcome to you.
yeah, that's unfortunately a part of the process, and well, it happens to everyone. And even people I know who have best education, a long professional history, they usually have to try multiple times before they actually find a position that is mutually satisfactory for them and for the employer. And so unfortunately, yeah, this is something, but I think it's a really good strategy what you did. So planning and treating this as a task to do, as a form of a job in itself to actually apply in a systematic way. and that will also prevent you from making mistakes, because if people just keep on applying randomly without planning the process and having this spreadsheet and registering every application, then it often happens that after a period of time they start to reapplying to the same company but for a different position, and then the same hiring manager might get two completely different motivational letters from the same person. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But also, what happened was not this time, because this time I was doing it super tidy and organized. But the first time you send a CV and you, especially with the LinkedIn direct applications with just a click, most of the time it doesn't work because you have not put enough effort in personalizing your CV or sending a motivation letter. But sometimes it still works and they give you a call and maybe you're in the middle of something else and you don't even remember what it is about, which position, which company, what you wrote. So that is not very successful. But I also understand that when you don't have yeah, all your day to do that, you do it like this. But I'm happy that the second time I could do it differently because it was much more efficient and also a bit more less stressful. When I got a phone call, I was not what I was doing in the beginning was sometimes I was not answering the phone because I didn't have access to information. And what if they ask me about whatever position that I don't remember? So this time I was more confident. I could answer the phone, and maybe with a click, I already had on my screen what it was about, and it could work much better. Yeah.
yeah, very good. Very important, very important thing to do. So whoever is watching this episode, just be systematic about your job search if you're in this process at the moment. Yeah, that's exactly. Okay. So I'd like to ask you now a little bit more about your experience before and after PhD, as you know how it differs, and also like referring to what you said before. I think that, like, from what I also see, talking to people who had different types of PhDs and different settings, you yourself chose for industry PhD, which it has its upsides and downsides. So on the one hand, it's more practically oriented, which is good, and like you are with your one leg already in the outer world, like in the real world. So in that sense, it's more practical. But on the other hand, sometimes you have to play a game because there are different parties with different goals, and your professors want to publish, and the company that hosts you or collaborates, they just want to have like commercially oriented projects. And what I also feel like, talking to people who have this type of PhDs, sometimes it's hard to play this game to satisfy everyone at the same time, because also what academic lifestyle and academic way of like building and releasing project is that it's a common it's a common property. So whatever you do, you also, the IP is kind of public, and then you have to kind of, when you publish your work, your whole pipeline should be presented and reproducible to others, that because it's the society who pays for it. Whereas in companies, of course, the IP of the company is the well kept secret usually, and so there is like some conflict of interest, and um, yeah, it's hard to play this game to make both sides happy at the same time. So I'd like to ask you, did you also experience this type of issues, or for you it went rather smoothly and you could easily manage on both sides?
Yeah, so what you described is true, and I saw it happening with a lot of people. I have to say, my case was easier because let's say of course it was a confidential project, but the level of confidentiality was not so high, and the company also had a bit of interest in publishing as a sort of, yeah, to show the outer world they're working on that. Of course, you, even in this case, which for me was quite smooth, I always had to ask for approval and this and that, and always check many times if this was okay to say or not. um, it was still a quite easy process, but you lose a bit of freedom. For example, in my case, I had the very big advantage that the company was quite clear in the beginning about what they wanted. So you feel a bit less lost, okay? You know where to go. And in the beginning, it helps a lot. So there are some clear deliverables and you know where to start. Um, but the more experienced you become, the more you would like to have your academic freedom to explore other things which are not in the deliverables and are still interesting for you. But also there I was lucky because I got the chance to do that. So the company was also okay with me working on some other things as long as everything which was in the project was was on track. I could explore some other aspects together with a couple of colleagues. So while on my activities, of course, I was in lead, the leader. There, in other activities, I might be more of a support person, but I could do something else on top of the project. So there, I had the freedom to experiment, and that was very important. So that's why I'm really grateful to all the people around it. So, okay, my professor, first of all, made it possible. My colleague Pedro, the postdoc I worked with on these other projects, and the people from Total, especially Bart, my co-supervisor, he understood that I needed that freedom. And, as long as everything was always on track on the project, this was not an issue. What I've seen with some other colleagues is that things get more difficult because you cannot publish. And for example, Ghent University really requires a minimum of 2 published papers as first author to allow you to submit the thesis. So it's it's doable, but if you have many confidentiality issues, it starts getting tricky. As an alternative, you could apply for a patent. This also counts. So I think it's very smart from Ghent University to valorize patents at the same way as a scientific publication in a journal, because then it's much easier to work with companies because, okay, the student is on a patent, so one less paper, but one more patent, we want to value them the same way. So that's a very good strategy to start overcoming these issues. But patenting is a very long process, much longer compared to journal publications. So in some cases, it still creates issues, but it's a big step forward to say, oh, we value a patent almost at the same level as we value a journal publication.
But it sounds also like I didn't patent anything to date, but it also feels that it's much harder, isn't it? Because you have to have like a proven ownership, like of some intellectual property or some new device that no one else ever proposed in the history of humankind. And indeed, it's a like it feels so much different from writing yet another journal publication where if you don't have enough publications under your belt, you can always write a review paper, or you can always write, you can wrap up your like new results even and just go for one of the low-key journals. You can always save yourself in some ways just to graduate. But with a patent, there are no easy solutions. It's either that you are like really a creator of a new method or a new device, or you're not, and there is
Yeah.
no like middle ground.
I'm not really an expert, but I think the two real requirements are novelty and inventiveness. So, it has to be new, but it also has to be inventive. So it's not just like, oh, I found something, it's new, I can patent it. No, you have to show that you could invent that and somebody else couldn't before you. But I'll be honest, the research which is done in university is so high level that it can happen quite often that this kind of super innovative things come out from universities.
It depends on the discipline. So in the European Union, it's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
hard to patent anything that is not pegged to any hardware. So if you just have a new algorithm or a method, something that is a software, piece of software, is very hard to to patent it. So
Yeah.
in your field, if you work more towards engineering, then it's easier because you always have some piece of hardware next to it, and that's much easier. But
Yeah, you're right. It's of course it's a very specific kind of situation, and for engineers, I think it's one of those which comes up more often. But like I have a colleague who, yeah, he struggled a bit through this patenting process, but now, uh, thanks to this experience he got, he's now still in university, but as sort of technology transfer manager. So now he's in this job where he helps students who have having or having issues with that to go through that. So of course, for engineering or for chemistry, it can be easier because maybe it's a molecule or maybe it's a piece of equipment. But at least Ghent University, I'm sure also other universities are doing it, are now putting these systems in place to help the students with these kind of issues, these technology transfer systems inside universities. They're really good support for people who are struggling with this kind of aspects. So I'm not sure about the software, as you said, but they also have a lot of software valorization in Uganda, for example. And maybe it's not via patenting, maybe it's via licensing, and then you start ending up in a different kind of world. Is a licensed piece of software as valuable as a journal publication? I don't know what's the status today, but probably should be, because, as you said, um, it is as if I could patent it, but I can't, then I can license it. It should have the same value. So it's a very actual, current topic, and it's a hot one, and it's important to talk about it. It's not my expertise, of course, but I'm happy you brought it up because I saw many colleagues struggling with that.
right, right. Well, I mean, it's good to learn about intellectual property as soon as possible, like as early in your education process as possible. I would start with copyrights because I think this is the biggest problem in industry, that there is a big violation of copyrights often, and then get to patents and trademarks. But yeah, of course, if you have an opportunity to learn about patent law early on, then probably it's also a good part of the education. But also, like, also people in industry sometimes don't realize that copying even one paragraph of text is already a plagiarism. Not mentioning even one sentence sometimes is a plagiarism. Like, you can't do that, and I can see that done a lot. And yeah, I think coming from academia, we also have more like natural recognition of what plagiarism means than
Yeah.
most people in industry. Yeah.
Yeah, reference, the idea of references, it's so, yeah, it's really a part of academic world. You always reference, you always put the source. And I think it's also an added value of hiring PhD people who have this attention for searching for sources first of all, and also mentioning the sources, which is important for two reasons. First of all, people can verify what you said, uh, and secondly, you are acknowledging and giving visibility to the work of other people. So these are, honestly, these are things that maybe before my PhD I would not even think about that. And yeah, I was much younger, but it's not really a matter of age, it's a matter of experience. When you start experiencing these things, you bring it with you.
Right.
And
Well, maybe it's also a cultural reason. So in academia, we really take care of who owns what and who authored what, because it really, the authorship is the currency. The authorship on research publications and grants.
too much, I think. But yes, indeed.
Probably too much, but then it really, we really get track on who puts their name on our text, right? So that then we become very territorial about our text, and that's why we care about copyrights much more probably than industry people, because in industry the thinking is, the team creates the product, so whatever document comes out of it is kind of everyone's property. It's not really yours anymore. So I think that's why maybe there is less understanding of what copyrights mean.
Yeah.
But anyways, I actually I'd like to also ask you about another aspect of an industry PhD that you actually mentioned before. So what you mentioned was that when you were starting your PhD, you didn't really have high expectations. So you didn't really have expectation that you will end up with a 10-year track position. You treated this as a 4-year adventure. And from what I see, really these expectations um, set the tone for the whole PhD, and the graduates who had that plan to do PhD as a standalone like 4-year study and end there, and they had that plan from the very beginning, usually come out as happier than those who had those high expectations from the very start and were like taking a PhD as an entry point to a lifelong career in academia. So I think uh, just as a general remark, I think expectations really influence your experience during a PhD. And do you also see that? Perhaps do you also see that phenomenon around you, like among your friends, that whoever takes PhD as treats a PhD as like 4-year journey rather than a start of an academic career is actually usually happier after graduation.
Yeah, and it's difficult to tell because many people, when they start, they don't know. I mean, some people uh, are sure about what they want, more or less. So in my case, I was sure that it would be a 4-year experience, or yeah, a limited period of time experience. So that's it. In the case of my brother, he started his PhD knowing he wanted to be professor. And if I compare the two of us, now he's gonna graduate soon and he's starting his postdoc. Um, we had different kind of frustrations, but the kind of frustrations he had, I don't envy him. It's really this idea of, okay, what about my future? What about my future? Eh, I knew my future would be somewhere else, so I took everything I could from it and I tried to give as much as possible, and then it was over. For him, there's still this dragging of, yeah, I need the the link to this university, but then I need to expand my network, otherwise I will not become a professor, so I will need to go abroad. He's still fighting for that, and I really wish him to succeed the same way I wish it to some other colleagues who know exactly what they want.
Mhm.
But I also talked to many people who changed their mind in between because they realized it was never going to happen, or it would take too much of their personal life to make that happen, and simply had to admit, I can't do this. I cannot put my whole life at stake for this. So I think you're right. Maybe in my case it was just easier knowing that it was a limited time experience. But on the other hand, we need professors, so we need people who stay in university to teach to the next generation, to guide the next generation. And we also need to make sure that those professors of the future will be the best and most motivated researchers and teachers. So with my experience, I don't want to discourage anybody from trying the academic life because we need good university professors. It's just a tough choice, which can be very, very rewarding when you get there. And I wish to my brother to get there, but it was not for me. Let's say
Right.
that's
And I also think that um, some people start it's also that PhD is very different from master studies, and it's really hard to tell if you're a material for a professor before you start your PhD because it's just a very different way of working, and some people didn't really get good grades during master studies, and then all of a sudden when it comes to solving problems, they all of a sudden they blossom, they flourish because they were bored with learning just for the exams to do repetitive assignments and have these closed form tasks during studies. But now when it comes to open problems, they are the creative types, so they actually start feeling the power and feeling energy to do it, and all of a sudden become really good PhD students. And there are also people who go exactly the other direction, and they had great
Yeah.
grades.
Also, the opposite happens. So the thing is, being a good student doesn't guarantee that you will be a successful PhD student. Also, because maybe we should start, well, at least from my experience, removing the word PhD student and call it something else, PhD candidate or PhD researcher. I called myself a doctoral researcher because it's a job. And nobody is going to tell you what you need to learn, by when you need to learn it, and etc. So it can be a bit difficult for very good students when they start their PhD and they start facing difficulties they never had before.
Right.
I had it a bit, but having had 2 years in between my master's and my PhD, I felt really that 2 years I really needed them, and I could start with a bit more maturity, so it was not such a big trauma. Yeah.
Right. And how does it feel now after your PhD to work in industry compared to before your PhD? So, what types of changes do you observe in yourself, and how did your working style and how did your values change in the process? And is it now easier or harder to be a R&D researcher than before?
Yeah. So the thing is, it's slightly difficult to compare because the job I was doing before my PhD was completely different. So first was process engineering and then sales, than what I'm doing now. But I can tell you I'm much happier now for two big reasons. The first one is I think I found a job which is really good for me. So to do research and development, so to constantly be faced with new things. So everything has to be new in research. And when it's not new, it means there's a problem with the current status. And so it's problem solving. And yeah, so I really like what I'm doing now. And it was not the same before. But the second reason why I'm happier now is not only because it's different, but as you said, I'm different. Uh, I'm older, maybe wiser, but I still am. But before I was very impatient. Everything had to happen immediately, super fast, and I was really craving for things to happen. Um, and now, yeah, I'm still a bit like that, but you start to realize that some things take time. It's really physiological. Even building relationship, building trust and mutual respect with people, it takes time, and there's you cannot force it. So that's on the human aspect. From the technical aspect, you can read and do as much as you want, but your brain has a certain capacity, and you need to give it time to adapt, to learn on the new things.
Mhm.
And on the process side, big organizations, they have a lot of advantages, but the changes can be slow. And now that I'm embracing it, I feel better because I was much more impatient and frustrated before. Now, yeah, I'm still very accelerated, but if I have to wait, fine, I will wait without getting too stressed. And PhD was a really good exercise from this point of view. But
Right.
of course, it was much more than that. The kind of things you learn about how to deal with yourself and deal with others, yeah, it's invaluable. So I'm happy I did it.
Cool. Okay, well, then that's a good, sounds good that you never regretted doing a PhD. But it's also, I think, also partially due to your attitude, I think. So, um, I
Well, I don't regret it now. While I was in it, I was regretting it. So it's important to say. Now looking back, I definitely don't regret it. But when I was in the middle, stuck with something and facing difficulties as anybody else, I regretted it so much. And I have to say it because maybe there are people who are doing their PhD and they're feeling just like that. I think it happens to everybody. So yeah, but now I'm happy. That's the important thing.
okay, great. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Honestly, if I had to say, if I'm happy that I did a PhD. It's like not a easy answer to give because you don't know the alternatives also. It was a few years of your life, but you don't know how you would spend it otherwise. If you didn't do a PhD, you would not be laying on the couch. You would still do something else and be ambitious in a different way, in a different field and doing something else. So it's really hard to compare. I know that this is sometimes expected of me to be super positive about PhD. Because I work with PhD students and on PhD
I
career.
think you have to be honest, not necessarily positive. I think honesty is more important than just being positive if there's no reason. And I still don't think PhD is something for everybody because as you were saying, you could be investing your time differently and being much more fulfilled. So it's a really good question to ask yourself. You
Mhm.
might not know that in the beginning, but maybe at the end of the first year, you know, if
Yeah,
if things are too much, but too much, I'm not suggesting you should give up, but should at least ask yourself, is that how I want to spend the next 2 or 3 years or 4 or 5, because the length changes. So yeah, I'm not surprised if many people cannot be 100% positive. I'm also not 100% positive, but if you ask me now, I don't regret it at all.
yeah.
If you had asked me 2 years ago, I would have been somewhere there struggling and asking myself, what did I do with my life? So yeah, I understand the feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. After 1 year of a PhD, you should do like a checkpoint for yourself, even like irrespective of whether or not you have a checkpoint at work, because many PhD students have that checkpoint after a year or a year and a half. But like regardless of that, you have to also do it like for yourself, because I mean, in first year of a PhD, most PhD candidates are lost, feeling lost because they just don't know the discipline well enough yet, and they cannot really formulate their own projects, and because like you have to learn a lot to know what is publishable, what is not publishable, what is already done, and everyone feels lost in their first year. But there are also aspects of academic life that you already know about. You know how daily life looks, so if you don't really like your lifestyle, if you don't really like your environment, like nothing will change for another 3 years. And with time, the amount of expectations and pressure from the outside on publications and results will only grow. So if you don't like your life after 1 year, then maybe it's indeed a good time to try something else.
Yeah,
And it's not quitting, it's just changing changing your decision or coming
yeah,
up with
yeah,
a new plan. So that's
yeah.
you
No,
know
but that's why even changing the title and saying, okay, I'm a doctoral researcher, and I was a doctoral researcher for 4 years, and at the end of that, I got a PhD degree. Fine. I was a doctoral researcher for 1 year and a half, and then I realized it was not something I was gonna do further, and then I changed my job, and it's not necessarily quitting. So you cannot call it quit. Yes, you're quitting this educational program, which is the PhD, but you're just investing your time on something different.
yeah,
Um, which, but it doesn't mean I really want to encourage people to stop, because it gets so difficult for everybody that you will think about stopping your PhD, yeah, at least 3 or 4 times minimum. And I think
yeah,
everybody has it. So it's not like the first time you start doubting, you should stop. But as you said, a very good self evaluation of, do I want to keep investing my time like this? It's important. And you also have to be lucky about where you do your PhD and which are the opportunities there. Because I'll be honest, in the moments where my PhD was becoming very difficult, Ghent University and the laboratory where I was offered a lot of opportunities to also do something else. For example, the doctoral school with courses about communication, project management, and yeah, writing skills and reading skills. So it gave a bit of variety where when I was too much lost in my research, I started looking somewhere else for reasons to stay, and I found them. And And in the meanwhile, I also learned a lot of valuable skills. So the context you are in, you also have to be a bit lucky. And that's why, yeah, I'm grateful I did it here, because the opportunities I got from this environment were a lot. And not everybody has the same. So I feel lucky about that.
Right, right. Yeah, and in all honesty, there is no one in the world who both did and didn't do a PhD. So no one can really tell. No
Yeah,
one can tell like what is the better way. So
yeah,
indeed.
exactly.
All right. All right. So, lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit more about your experience with management techniques, especially Agile, because I know that you're a big proponent of Agile in academic system as well. So, could you tell us a little bit more? First of all, maybe to some of the viewers, I think Agile rings a bell to pretty much everyone today, but uh, many of us never really had to do with Agile at work. So if you could briefly explain what it means, and maybe as opposed to some other popular management schemes such as Scrum or Waterfall, and why do you think that Agile is a methodology in management that should be also implemented in academia, and how do you think it should be done?
Okay, so this is it was a very long question, and
I
it will
know.
require a very long answer, but I will try to keep it to the point. So um, let's start just from the PhD, because that's where it started from me. Then we can go a bit broader. Your PhD, it's a project. So there's something you want to do, and you have to do it with a certain time and within a certain budget, and with some people who are supporting you. So it's a project. The moment you start putting a deadline or having in mind a deliverable or yeah, a time schedule, whatever, you are already starting project management. So project management can mean many different things, but it's really how do I get there? So you need a plan, and you need a way of working, you need a strategy. And I'm a PhD in chemical engineering. I'm not a project management or an expert, but I felt this need to keep things tidy during my work. So I was searching for some methods to help me work better. And when you start traditional project management courses, I took one basic introductory one at Ghent University. That's one of the kind of opportunities I'm grateful for. You hear a sort of more traditional way, like you mentioned the waterfall approach, which is a very linear way of dealing with projects, meaning that you split your work in different phases. So you will have a very detailed planning at the beginning. So first you idea generation, and then very detailed planning, and then you will start executing, and then you will deliver something, and then at the very end you will check if there's some adjustments to do. So that's why they call it waterfall, because it's one thing after the other, very detailed. And it works very well for a lot of things which are very consolidated. If I think of chemical engineering, for example, yeah, you always have a sort of feasibility phase. Can we do that? Then you do something which is called basic engineering design. Okay, if we do that, how it will look like more or less. Then you go to a phase which is called front-end engineering design, which is more like, okay, we're doing it. How does our equipment look like? How big it is? Where do we put it? And at the end, you go for what is called EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction, where you actually buy all the stuff you need and build your plant. And it has been done like that for many plants, and it works for many projects. The problem with this system is that they're not very flexible. So if there's an additional risk, if there's something which is changing, it's a bit more volatile, it's very difficult to change the plan, because it all went after each other, and it's very difficult to come back. You have to do a scope change or a budget change. It's really heavy. Um, And so I thought for university or research in general, this doesn't work because research, it's a very risky business. You're always trying to do something new that people didn't do before you. So how can you apply such a traditional kind of system, which honestly, it's better than nothing. So I'm really happy that now in proposals, they always ask for a Gantt chart where you put all your faces one after the other and then you put them all in time. So that's definitely better than not having anything, but it doesn't allow for flexibility. While I started looking into Agile, because Agile, I searched the meaning, it really means able to move smoothly and fast. And that it's all about that, trying to find ways of working which are flexible and can adapt to change faster. And so where the risk it's minimized because you are splitting your work in a different way, which is not linear, it's iterative, especially if you think about Scrum, which is a sort of agile methodology. And constantly going back and having feedback moments and always rechecking what you're doing. Is it in line with what we really need? You can accommodate a lot of change. So it's a very typical example, but I still want to give it for people who have no clue. Let's say you want to build a car, then you plan it, you design it, and you have everything on paper. And then you start building it. First, you build the motor, and then you put the wheels, and then you put the frame. And at the very end, you have your car. If the project stopped in the middle because there was no budget or something really unexpected happened, you would have a motor placed on some wheels and an unusable car. So you could not get there. If you wanted to start with a very agile way, this is an extreme example, but I hope it's helpful. You don't start with that. You say, okay, in the first week I will make a skateboard. Okay, why would you make a skateboard if I asked you for a car? Because you go back to why do you want a car? You want a car because you want to be able to move 4 or 5 people much faster than walking for longer distances. Then I give you a skateboard as first step, and okay, it's not working, but it's able to move one person for a moderate distance a bit faster than walking. Okay, then second step, I give you a bicycle. Same story. It's not what you wanted, but it would allow you to move fast for a longer distance. Motorcycle, you're moving 2 people for longer distances, and then you end up with the car, and you end up with your final result. If the budget had stopped uh, earlier or something happened, you might have ended up with a motorcycle, which is not what you wanted, but at least it can move 2 people for longer distance and much faster than walking. So you have a bit minimized the risk of having to walk. So this is an extreme example. You would never do that for a car that you know exactly well how to do, but for new things, this can be very useful. Now, this is very easy to imagine for a car. It's also easy to imagine for software because that's where it started from, the Agile. It was the Agile Manifesto, was a group of software developers in 2001 who started saying, we want a software which works. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to work and we need it fast. So we want to prioritize functionality over extensive documentation. And we want to give this software to our customers immediately, even if it's not perfect, because we want their feedback soon. And so also software, you can see it quite easily because you will have a first release, which has only some features, and then you will add more and more. So you might get perfect in the end, but you will already have something functional from the very beginning. So this is a bit the idea of thinking agile. So as I told you, I'm not really an expert, so I'm not going to go into tools and methodology and all the perfect terminology, but as a philosophy, really of life. That's how I try to apply it. And my efforts during my PhD were, how can we make it work for research? Because, okay, the car, you understand, the software, you understand, but how about research? So yeah, that's why I got in touch with a lot of people, and many people got in touch with me. So I'm really happy that this idea reached them. Okay, how can we make our PhD more agile? And we built some case studies, for example, based on small things. For example, writing a paper. You want to write a paper for a journal. You might do it, okay, I will start from the results, then I will do the conclusions, then I will do the introduction, then the methodology, then I will try to make it as perfect as possible, and then I will send it to my professor. That's the way most people do it. It works, and yeah, it's fine. It's a way of managing your project, which is your paper. But the issue is, can you send a paper which has no introduction or no methods? No, so you can't. So even if results and conclusions were perfect, you will still need all the rest. So the idea was, okay, what about an agile paper? I tried to write everything together, but first I put only titles, then I put only a couple of bullet points, then I add some figures, which I think are important, then I add the important references, and only at the very end, I try to make the text as complete as possible. Um, and I will try to interact with my professor at every step, so that if already my bullet points are wrong or are not aligned with what he would want or what the company would want, or I find out immediately, and I don't find out after I spent a month of writing. And of course, you cannot send a paper which is complete, but it's just bullet points. So you still have to work on that. But at least you're sure that you will have something in the introduction, something in the methodology, something in the results and the conclusion. It's important. Trying to be agile doesn't mean reducing the quality. In the end, you need your full paper, you need your full car, but it's about minimizing the risks of things going completely wrong. And that's why, okay, I proposed the Scrum way of doing it with the small sprints. And yeah, we can talk more about that. There's a lot to read, but the idea was I will try to structure my work as small sprints instead of having a huge marathon of work. And so Scrum is a way. Another very popular word is Kanban, which is another sort of philosophy which really tells you, sometimes it's just common sense. You cannot do too many things at the same time. So this is obvious, right? But Kanban tells you, try to visualize it, put it on a board, visualize your work, and you will realize immediately in which phase you have too much work. So it's also about, you cannot push work forward, you have to pull it. So when there is space in the next execution phase, you will pull it from the previous execution phase. You cannot just push work, like you sending a lot of material to your professor not having the time to read it. Yeah, it's not gonna work. Maybe if your professor lets you know, okay, I have time tomorrow to read your paper, and that's the moment where you focus and send the paper. So many of these things are common sense, but put into a structure, into a method. So you can think it's a philosophy, you can think it's a methodology, it's a project management technique, but it's a way of minimizing risk, having more interactions with the people which are involved, and more transparency also. So yeah, it was a lot of stuff, but I really tried to condensate in few minutes many different kind of things. Maybe if you have some specific curiosity, you can ask, but that was a bit the broad picture.
Oh, that's fantastic, Laura. And I think if the viewers have more questions, they can always contact you through LinkedIn and ask.
Yeah, sure.
Put the questions under this episode, and we'll take those questions. That's super interesting. And is this your personal approach, or is there like a larger group of researchers who are trying to implement agile in their practice.
Yeah, I think Agile is popping up here and there. The Agile Lab, it's an initiative in the US. There's an Agile blog from a guy in Denmark. So it's becoming more and more popular. And I'll be honest, so many people are getting in touch to to know how can we do that. I always give the same answer, which is okay, I can help you rethink your work in a different way. It's mostly my opinion and way of work is not super traditional or very yeah technical project management, but by trying to rethink your work, many people are trying now. And on the 29th of March, I will give a lecture from some students at TU Delft about this, because there has been this request of, okay, how can we do it in our PhD? How can we become more agile? And just starting thinking about that is the first step. And then if you do it with a sprint, or you do it with a Kanban board, or you do it with a dedicated software, anything is fine. You just need to make that step of, I cannot let fate decide for me. I have to plan
Mhm.
adequately and flexibly, not
Right,
linearly, waterfall, and everything at the end could go still wrong.
right. Well, like one comment I have is that to implement the strategy, you also have to have cooperative boss, right? So you have to have someone who is willing to take a look at your steps. And I feel there is still a problem in academia that many senior researchers, they really minimize the contact with their students and only look at the final output. So in many labs are so huge that you only work with postdocs before you have a draft, and then only then your promoter is actually looking at it, and there is just no way of implementing this strategy in daily life. I hope it will change at some point, but I feel like when I think about the grad school where I was studying, it would be just hard to do it this way because yeah, it would require like discussing the paper every week, I would say, and I don't think.
Yeah. So that's I'm really grateful to my professor, because he decided to give it a try. And so, not in such a structured way, but before, he had a monthly meeting with each student of 1 hour, but that's usually took longer, and it was a very difficult meeting, because in a month a lot of things can happen, and etc. And he was struggling with that, so he was quite honest to me, and he told me, like, I'm struggling with this system, it's not working very well for me. But he also said, I don't have time to do it differently. And
Right.
so what we changed, it was that instead of having 1 hour per month, we had 15 minutes per week, which doesn't seem a lot, but honestly, it was, yeah, it gave us some room to talk to him every week. And we always did it 8:45, or at 5, or close to the lunch break, so that we were sure he was not teaching or he was not in meetings, so to make sure it was regular. And so each one of us always got their 15 minutes. Then when something very big popped up, of course you would also plan a bigger meeting with more people in there, but these 15 minutes were just the entry point
Mhm.
to him. And sometimes in 15 minutes you can solve problems, or you can at least bring up problems. And we always did it standing or walking, to make sure it was just 15 minutes and we didn't get too long. And we didn't bring graphs or computers, but it was really, okay, that's what I'm doing, that's what I want to do, these are the problems I'm facing. And if he realized somebody was doing something that was really not in line with what he thought, he could stop it immediately, with a month. So I'm happy he did that. Of course, it doesn't mean we applied Agile for everything, but this was already something that they still do it, even though I left all my colleagues. So every morning he has somebody, every lunch and every evening, and it's working. And it's only 15 minutes per student per week. And I think nobody yeah, many people could deny it, but it would be really strange. Like you don't have 15 minutes for your students. So that was a way. Uh, but what I told to Francesco, a guy who asked me exactly the same question, you don't have to go all in, okay? You don't have to take all the agile methods and all the ways and go all in. So what I told him is, let's say you want to apply Kanban. Kanban is something you could try to apply partially even by yourself. And you put everything on a board with your post-its and you say, this is the stage I'm at, this is the next one. You don't have to go to your professor and say, this is a Kanban board and I'm applying this strategy. You could just go with this table and say, look, I have so many things in the pipeline now and I cannot deal with that. But if we did it differently, I could spread it over a different set of time. And so you have to use what you can. And even if it's not everything, a bit is better than zero. So yeah, but it's a much more complicated topic than yeah, I'm actually telling it in a simplified way, but there's a lot of potential for improvement.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think it's very interesting. So we'd like to encourage everyone who is interested in learning more about Agile, Kanban, and other techniques to explore this topic more. I think it's also something nice that I see in academia these days, that there are more and more courses for PhD candidates in terms of project management. And in my times when I was starting my PhD, we were taking courses in academic writing in our first year, or presentation skills. And I can see that today PhD students start their grad school with taking project management courses. So that's quite a difference already in the culture, and I think it's a good change. Okay, so lastly, I'd like to ask you briefly about some general advice. Is there anything you would like to tell to PhD candidates who are now not decided yet what to do next, and something that you might advise just from your own experience to the general population of PhD candidates?
Yeah. So one thing I already said, I just want to stress it again. When you are starting to finish your PhD and you need to understand what to do next, really take a step back and have a look at the network you have built, because it's always a matter, okay, of what you want, but also what opportunities are there. And there might be a lot of opportunities a bit hidden, and you might have access to that and you don't know yet. So really think about, okay, all the people I met, all the things I did so far, what can help me? So that's one very general thing. And another one, which is a bit deeper, is PhD is a very challenging thing and it's tiring, etc. But when you stop it, and you don't know why you're in it, when you stop it, you will sort of miss it. You will sort of miss that kind of constant push for doing it more and challenging yourself. So if you are liking it now, make sure that you have that in your next job, because not every job might have the same kind of drive. And if you're sick of it now, fine. But if you're sort of liking this kind of pressure and high speed and being always at the edge of technology, try to make sure your future job has a bit of that. Doesn't matter how tired you are now during your PhD, you will regain the energy later. So don't let being tired and yeah, I just want this to be over, yeah, come over your ideas and take you on the wrong path. If you're liking this kind of drive and push and adrenaline, which can come from research, um, try to keep it there in your next job, because for me so far it's making a big difference.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Laura, for all these great insights and for explaining Agile to us, and for all your great advice. Thank you guys for watching. And if you'd like to get more of this type of content, then please subscribe to the channel. And we would like to welcome your questions and comments here below the episode. Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, for visiting us today. And have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.